I'm going to say good morning because I'm in New York. It's about 9:30, and I'm suited and booted because in a couple of hours I will be going down to the UN to have a meeting with a group of ambassadors talking about child rights and International Day of Play. I'm really happy to be on the call with you today. I want to firstly salute Terry for spectacularly good campaigning leadership, sharp focus, and as Josh said, focusing on doing rather than talking. And I also want to thank the coalition of people that have supported him, the care experience people that have supported him, and also all of you amazing local authority councillors who have supported and engaged with this initiative. You have no idea how much this means to all of us that have lived in care, and some of you yourself are from care backgrounds, which we're also very proud of. So my job is very different to what a lot of people on the call are doing. I work globally for the UN, kind of lead advocacy with governments all around the world on child development and child protection issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about why the UK story of care is so important from a human rights perspective in a moment. But I just want to share a bit of a story to give some to give a bit of a framing to the conversation. So just before I got suited and booted, I was doing our breakfast routine with our son Noah, who's 21 months old, and we were going through the motions, and I was singing Itsy Bitsy Spider and trying to negotiate with him to eat his breakfast, and being very child-led and aware of the science on child development. And I was thinking about this call, and I was imagining how much things have changed, because if you transported that scene back to the 1990s or the 1960s or the 1930s, it would be unfathomable to parents of children that age then. And it's always important to remember in this conversation, our understanding and our knowledge of child development and child protection is changing at pace. And it has often been a challenge to manage care systems when the knowledge about child development and child protection has not been in place. But now there has been a revolution globally where we, from the intersection of psychology, neuroscience, pediatric and pedagogy, we now know much more than we ever did before about child development and child protection. We know that for children, danger is not just the presence of violence, it's the absence of love. And when children feel danger, they have toxic stress, which elevates almost every single part of the evolving child neurobiology into a state of distress, and makes them unable to go through the routine, normal development processes. We know that children ask 100 questions an hour through early childhood and beyond, and it is a response of the parents to those questions that fuels child development, is the foundation of learning, and helps children to feel safe and a sense of belonging. And that sets the model for the relationships and the outcomes they will have throughout the life cycle. This provides us at the UN and all of you working in government and civil society with incredible opportunity. We can begin to imagine a world where, based on this science, we can create systems that children are no longer maltreated, that children are no longer neglected, that we have interventions early to transform the way that children are cared for in families. This is a huge opportunity, but it also sets out that we no longer have any excuses to fail children. Caring for all children in our society is a human rights obligation. And I've often said, and sometimes it's a controversial viewpoint, but I've often said that I think that in post-war, that's the Second World War, British history, children in care in the United Kingdom are the most human rights violated population within the UK. Why do I say that? The first one, and I think Josh has alluded to this earlier, and also Emma, Councillor Emma, the outcomes. It's clear the outcomes are outrageous. You know, people from care make up less than 1% of the population. Somebody just quoted 80,000. Yet, a quarter of both the homeless and the prison population, according to some data, and are 70% more likely to die early than the rest of the population. Growing up in care, as I did, the main target of organised crime for recruitment, the main target for trafficking and grooming and a whole range of other risks. We're not the only target, and I'll come to that in a minute, but one of the main targets. I want to also make a point, and it's my second point, that the situation of children in care is the tip of a very visible iceberg, right? We know that if less than 1% of children in, say, Wales are in care, we know that more than 13% of Welsh children experience 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. We know that more than 50% of Welsh children, for example, experience 1 or more adverse childhood experience. We are transforming into a society that recognizes that trauma, maltreatment, neglect, and abuse affects a far greater number of children in society than we previously saw. Statistically, half of the people not from care on this call will have experienced some form of child trauma. We are the tip of that iceberg, but we've always been the visible tip of the iceberg. So when in routine conversation it comes out that we are from care, we are disclosing automatically that we were neglected, abused, maltreated, unwanted at home, that our parents couldn't care for us. And we know that when people disclose, from research in Germany and Turkey and other places now, brand new research, we know that when people disclose child maltreatment, the social distance is much greater than if they disclose other forms of trauma. We now have a way of measuring the extent of stigma into society. And I think that one of the things we have to recognize from a human rights perspective is that we can only really address the stigma that children from care feel if we also address the broader stigma and the silence around child maltreatment overall. The third reason I think this is a human rights issue is to do with the legal nature of human rights. So I work at the UN on human rights, but when I go back to the UK and I go down the pub, and people say, "What do you do?" and I say, "I work on human rights." Everybody in the pub has got a view on what human rights are. If you ask them, "Oh yeah, I know human rights," and I give you a view, and often the view is really poorly informed, a view that human rights applies to some groups and not others, that it belongs to one political entity in society. This is very wrong, and of course in the age of polarization, we have greater risk that human rights is given less importance in our society. But human rights are based upon a global UN set of covenants and conventions that stem from the Declaration of Human Rights that all countries, whatever their political perspective, have signed up to. And most importantly for me, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But what's important about human rights that people don't always understand is that human rights is the duty bearer of human rights is always the government. Right, it's always the government. They are the signatory to the human rights conventions. They are responsible for protecting the rights holder, which is the citizen. Young people in care are the only people that go to bed at night, or one of the only groups of people that go to bed at night every night under the care of the duty bearer directly. As a young man of 13 years of age, a boy in Birmingham in the 1980s, I was in a children's home where I was stripped, humiliated, and dragged through the children's home by the people that worked in the children's home, right? So what does that mean from a human rights perspective? They were the duty bearers. They were the representatives of the government. It was immediately not only a crime and a grave injustice, but it was also a human rights violation. If the same thing had happened outside the children's home with peers or with family, it would also be a grave injustice and a crime, but it wouldn't automatically be a human rights violation unless the government were notified of it and didn't respond to it. So every time something criminal happens to children in care, because of the actions of those that work in the system, it is done on behalf of the British government and is therefore automatically a human rights violation. So these are three reasons that I think that children in care in the UK are specifically important human rights issue. But I also want to now say something very personal to me as a care leaver about why this is so important. Throughout my life, I've been invited to go, I live abroad, but I've been invited back to the UK to speak at events where people are trying to improve the care system, and they're trying to improve it by having a participatory process where people like us come along and speak and give our opinion, express what we think, and that's really important. It's really important our voice is heard. But the civil rights movement in the US talk about something that's a diffusion strategy. When you have an event to discuss, but you don't then act and change things. And now the science is so clear on what children in care need, how we can improve their lives. It's a question of political will and investment in the system to make the system deliver what the science tells us that children need. And that's what I want as somebody from a care background. I don't want the next generation of children to grow through what many of us have lived through. When I look at my son, what happened to me is unimaginable to myself. And the depths and the silence with which we have to live the lives that we live in a world where we are not really understood, where what we have been through cannot properly be verbalized, where most people don't have the language to talk about it. And all of our services have not been built with the depth of understanding to help children heal and find a pathway to recovery. So I want to come back again to Terry's brilliant leadership on this. I hope by defining care experience as a protective characteristic, we will reverse the negative outcomes. We will stand up as the duty bearer to protect and ensure good, healthy development for all children, and we will be the generation that ends the maltreatment of children in care in the United Kingdom. Thank you very much.
Wow, Ben. Well,
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Okay.